and Mr. Bertrand Casse, who will be talking about PEMEA current deployments and evolutions. Mr. Casse is the Director of the Business Unit in charge of Public Safety Services within the Deveryware Group. He has participated since 2015 in the INA Technical Committee to the first work on the operational aspects of the future PEMEA standard. Mr. Bertrand, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. And hello, good morning, good afternoon, sorry, everyone. So in this section, we'll present the current situation of the PEMEA network deployment, situation based on testimonies and direct feedback that we receive, of course, and we'll give a synthetic roadmap about the future evolution. Next slide, please. Okay, so next slide. Okay, first of all, I would like to start by reviewing the milestones since the creation of the standard, as just mentioned, Luca. So it has been starting since, let's say, 6 years ago. And I think we can say that PEMEA certainly wouldn't exist today without the momentum of INA back in 2015. Momentum which has been extended to an EC project called Nexus. And it's really been the contribution of emergency stakeholders and technological partners involved that allow the emergence of services and especially the requirements that exist today. So I would like also to take the benefits, since I'm seeing in that call many of the contributors of from the first hours, to really warmly thank you on behalf of the consortium. So in that slide, depict 3 different sets of services. So the one that has been presented by Luca, which is the core PEMEA, which is in fact the basic services, which include the geolocation of accurate geolocation, the sharing of personal information to enable interoperability of apps wherever PEMEA is implemented. Then the multimedia services, which are being currently deployed in a few countries. And of course, the multimedia services include the core services. And for both sets, we can see that the cycle has been followed between specifications, experimentations, return of experimentations that feed the standards, and finally the live deployments. So I think it's important to mention that we put a lot of emphasis in this interaction between the different contributors, and this really strong cooperation allows the standard today go in the right direction of greater interoperability, greater flexibility to integrate, for instance, new internet services that we'll see in a minute. So the last set correspond to the service under experimentation, let's say today, that we plan in the last part of this year and onward, that are the public alert via PEMEA using the CAP protocol, as well as the management of IoT devices that, as mentioned, some experimentation are planned. Of course, it is not decided so far whether the outcome of experiment will become a candidate for standardization. The only things that we can say is there is already a request coming from PSAP in that direction. Next slide, please. So in that slide, we show the current map of deployment in Europe. So different colors. In blue, there are the countries whose PSAP are connected to PEMEA network. So in real environment. In yellow, those which are in the process of deployment. and in red, the country which are in the process of experimentation before hopefully next implementation. So we put on the left side the use cases the most often requested by the PSAPs, such as the ability to receive calls from people while roaming, or the use of apps to improve accessibility for people with disabilities, and finally the capability to extend the inbound call service to the internet application by providing an access point. Next slide, please. So in the following slides, we'll show what motivated the countries that have implemented or are implemented the network today. So starting with Italy. So in Italy, the motivation for implementing PEMEA was to obtain automatically the accurate location information about foreign visitors, as mentioned in the call flow before by Luca, and also the ability to use the Where Are You app in neighboring countries for people on the go, which is already mentioned, the core service since the beginning for PEMEA. About the target services, REU with the Regional Emergency Agency for North region in Italy manage access to the core services using a hybrid configuration, so mixing cloud and on-premise solutions. It has to be noticed that the full implementation took 3 months. The next slide is Finland. So in Finland came the same motivation than Italy. So to get automatically the accurate location information for foreign visitors, and the ability for a person in need to use their own app to set up a 112 call when traveling to in the other country in Europe. The project involved modifying the existing Suomi app to make it compatible with the standards and implementing the PEMEA infrastructure within the PSAP environment. So when you say modify the Suomi app, in fact, it's Suomi app server. The app itself doesn't has to be modified. The implementation in Finland was done at the end of 2020. So as you know, in the middle of the pandemic period, so the whole installation and testing procedure was performed remotely, and thanks to the virtualization, so that all the procedures that we can use today to ease the implementation, the project has been we can make it from remote in 3 months. So it was a great positive success. In the next slide is a project that is still ongoing in Romania, and we can tell that it's a very flagship project, as it's the first country in Europe to implement next generation 112 ISNet-based emergency services. That's we'll see the implication with PEMEA then. About PEMEA, the initial request was to provide an app and an infrastructure for deaf and hard of hearing people. The rest of the project showed that the complementarity and flexibility that PEMEA can bring, especially with web services, and really quickly the project turned into a real work of interoperability between the two standards, so meaning NG12 and PEMEA. The fruit of this work is a standardization effort. As the HC work items have been open for a year now, and new specifications are being developed as we speak. We have with us today James that can say a word at the end if any questions. The implemented and tested features are listed in the slide. So advanced web services providing PEMEA instant messaging and real-time text, secure file sharing and pictogram on one side. On the other, we implemented audio video communication using WebRTC to provide additional support for people with disabilities. About key findings about implementation, I think, as I mentioned, is still ongoing. But what we can say is really the great flexibility brought by PEMEA. And that's, for instance, allow to add asynchronous communications to the SIP environment that at the end is beneficial for the caller and for the ecosystem. Next slide, please. Okay, so this slide is about the Spanish region that's being deployed. Here we find the same drivers as for Romania. So namely the use of standards and the possibility to extend the communication through the incorporation of the channel offered by the apps and the mobile. Here the intention is to deploy specific apps for deaf people, but not only. The PSAPs want also leveraging other regional apps, and of course the ones which are the most used so far. Summarizing, the first set of targeted services deployed this year are of course the core services and extend messaging, so through chat and RTT, the video conferencing service and SIP integration to NG1.2 will come later. We can note that some regions have also requested public alerting services through the PEMEA application. Next slide, please. So now, what are the steps in terms of evolutions? Of course, the evolution plan depends on the strategy of each country. It can be also led by regulation. So as you know, addressing concern as location, accurate location, or lack of accessibility is now part of a new European code dealing with emergency communications. This regulation, of course, will have to be adapted in the next years. So we can think that all countries are looking at how to implement such new services. What we report here is what generally the PSAP told us. So short and medium term report is to expand the coverage of core services as widely possible in Europe, so to have continuity in terms of coverage. At the same time, is to expand the use, specification, and standardization for the advanced capabilities, meaning the chat, the RTT, and video conference. So this work currently being done within the HC MTEL organization. Other features required by PSAP, such as public alerts, are under development so far, and we expect that specification can be done by end of the year and beginning of next. Finally, as we saw in Luca's presentation about benefits, PEMEA allows wide communication facility between third-party service provider and emergency services. So it's also a way of direction for the consortium. And moreover, with the emergence of new service, especially based on IoT devices, PEMEA can be in the future a safe way to establish communication with 112. That concludes my presentation, and I'll leave the floor now to Evangelos, and happy to answer the questions.